Hey all, here are OS Reviews. Today we're taking a closer look at the Lenovo Live Pods LP1. These are ultra-budget TWS wireless buds, which sell for under $20. In fact, they usually go on sale for less than that, making them some of the cheapest wireless buds that you'll find. It comes in a design that's kind of inspired by the Apple AirPods, or rather the AirPod Pros in terms of the shape of the box. Uses Bluetooth 5.0, although specs are also entry level, so we're talking about battery life that's just so-so. It can last for upwards of 12 hours with the battery case. The buds, when removed, will last for roughly 3 hours of continuous music listening, and they are also IPX4 rated, so they can be resistant to sweat and rain, and it will still survive. But definitely not an endurance champion, so chances are you'll still need to charge it every few days. Now, in terms of these drivers, they're using 10mm dynamic drivers, which are slightly larger than average, and they do have touch controls that you can use to play and pause your music, skip tracks, although volume control is unfortunately missing from the functionality list. There's a few colors that you can pick from in terms of the accent of the box, including a red edition, giving it some options that you can pick between, and otherwise just has a very lightweight form factor. Like other buds in this price range, it supports codecs like SBC and AAC, although it doesn't have, say, Qualcomm's aptX. Inside here we have the buds themselves, which we'll take a closer look at. There's also a USB Type-C charging cable, so it's great to see that they are still using a very standard charging port instead of cheaping out and using micro USB. This is a good decision, since the Redmi AirDots, for example, that sell for around the same price, still uses the older micro USB. So we also have some spare silicone tips to get a more snug fit, and just a very quick user guide. Alright, so taking a closer look at the design of the Live Pods themselves, it's made out of the same glossy polycarbonate plastic as the aforementioned Apple AirPods, and doesn't feel too cheap, doesn't feel like anything is loose or anything like that, and it's actually somewhat better feeling, I'd say, compared to the more coarse plastic used on the Redmi AirDots, again one of its biggest competitors at this price range. And otherwise we have the aforementioned Type-C port for charging on the base, along with an LED indication light when it's charging, and then nothing else on the rear aside from some basic specs. The door here opens up pretty well, and when it's open it's stiff so it doesn't fall loose. And we can see that the case size is quite compact and small. Aside from the buds, it doesn't have too much room for much of anything else, hence the slightly smaller battery life, but also because of how compact these are. And once removed from the battery case, that's when they actually start to pair and connect with your device. The process is relatively fast and seamless, and the design of the buds, as aforementioned, has a stem, so similar to the AirPods. Although one difference compared to the regular model is, of course, these still have a silicone in-ear style, so they are a little closer to the AirPod Pros in the sense there's a tighter fit, blocks out a bit more of noise with isolation. If you're walking around and doing some light jogging, they can still stay in place, they don't feel too loose. We simply have a chrome-edged charging connector ports on the very base, and then the stem area here is touch sensitive, which is pretty responsive in my testing so far. Now moving into audio quality and performance, for $20 you can't expect something that's truly hi-fi or audiophile grade, but they definitely sound much better than the price would suggest. In fact, there's a nice amount of bass here that I wasn't really expecting, so especially if you are listening to a drum beat or EDM style music, you'll actually be pleasantly surprised. It gives you a bit of a punch whenever those notes hit. At the same time, still has a pleasant amount of detail in the mids, I'd say, and if you're listening to, say, a pop song, it still is very lively, it has a loud enough volume, and it gets you immersed in the music while you're performing sports and walking around without really any problems. If we're being super nitpicky, perhaps details in the treble, higher frequency sounds could be further refined. That's probably its biggest contrast if you're putting it against a more expensive pair of headphones. However, it doesn't sound muddy either. I would say overall still does a great job for what it is. It doesn't have the most neutral or realistic sound. It definitely has a slight emphasis on the bass, but that's not a bad thing. Again, if you're wearing these for light sports, you want to feel energized, or just for pop music in general, I think it will still do a very good job. In terms of connectivity, I also didn't really encounter any issues in terms of no skipping, no popping, and the music was synced quite well to the video if I was watching something on YouTube or Netflix without any delay between the left or the right sides, which is quite good. Although one thing to keep in mind here is these don't have a dedicated gaming mode or low latency mode. So if you are playing back a game like PUBG, whenever you hit the trigger of a gun and hear the shot, there is going to be a slight gap. It's still very much usable, especially at this price, but it is one thing to keep in mind. Some other headsets like the Halo GT1s, which have a dedicated gaming mode, can perform a little bit better in this regard. Call quality is average. I would say it's not too different from the Redmi AirDots in this regard. It doesn't have the most advanced noise cancellation or anything like that. So if you're outdoors, there's a bit of wind noise around you or background chatter, it doesn't quite do as good of a job as something like the real AirPods in terms of focusing only on your voice. But if you're in a quieter space, it sounds okay. So that's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Lenovo Live Pods. It's Lenovo's attempt at bringing a super low-cost pair of TWS wireless buds, which actually perform better than I was expecting. So if you're interested in something that doesn't break the bank and you just want something quick to listen to music with while you're out and about or doing some quick jogging, this might be worth a closer look. So you can check out more details if interested in the links below. For now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.